Welcome into the OBR streaming network. This is another edition of the React. Welcome on into the chat. Good to see you guys. David, Rodney, appreciate you guys being here. Everybody over on Twitch as well. Make sure you hit like, subscribe, and the notification bell so you know every time that we go live here on the network. I hope you enjoyed Browns 3D before us, and Garage Beers will be after us tonight. It's a full night of programming here on the network. The man next to me, the one and only Pete Smith, always fantastic. What's going on, Pete?
Not a whole lot. We get more OTAs tomorrow, and along the lines of PFF and everything else, it's list season and speculation season. So we're getting plenty of that.
Yeah, a lot of nonsense going on out there. So we're gonna start tonight with Stefanski at the golf outing. He had some interesting things to say. It's a little bit difficult to hear the questions, Pete. So I think I'm gonna try to read those when we can. But yeah, he Brown's annual golf outing. Where do they hold that at? Do you know?
I do not.
Interesting. I don't know either. Maybe one of you in the chat knows. It's always at the same place. Can't think of it right now. It's escaping me. But yeah, so lots of stuff from Stefanski. The press will be back at minicamp tomorrow, so all the nonsense will be stirred up again. People taking statistics of 7-on-7s and all that madness. But let's dive into this here first. Westwood, thank you, Pat Shea. Westwood Country Club. So let's dive into what Kev had to say yesterday, I believe, the golf outing. Whoop, a little small there.
Okay, excited to be out here. Obviously, this is a signature event for our Browns Foundation and everything that Dee and Jimmy are doing in the community. So this is an awesome day. Obviously, as you guys see, great weather. So we're excited to be out here. Got a bunch of players out here. All our coaches are out here. So as you know, raising money for a good cause. So special day, and then we'll get back to work tomorrow. But with that, I'll take any questions. Honestly, Tony, every day is different. Every day we're mixing and matching, if you will, giving guys different looks. I've told you before, it's not going to be a 25% down the middle type thing, or I guess down to fourth, but we're trying to expose the guys to different things.
What have you learned about these guys coming outside?
Yeah, we've learned a lot, Jeff. I think the big thing is, and we've talked about this, this is an all-encompassing evaluation. So we were evaluating the guys during phase 1, during phase 2, and now
the volume on this video is rather low. Pete, are you having trouble hearing it?
Yep, I'm looking at the transcript.
And some team drills, so all of that adds up to reps for us to look at, and it's not just looking at the result of a play. We're looking really at everything with these guys.
Does it get any better is the question.
Yeah, those guys are doing great. They are both wired to get in early, stay late, put in whatever work is required. They're sponges in the meeting room, which I think is really fun for me.
All right, let's not do this. This is bad programming. All right, let's. As you said in the chat, let's go through the highlights. Have we seen anything different at Kevin? Will we see anything different at OTAs Wednesday in terms of quarterback rotation? He just said that basically every day is different. every day we were mixing and matching, if you will, giving guys different looks. I told you before, it's not going to be 25% down the middle type of thing, but we're trying to expose the guys to different things. What have you learned about the guys? Yeah, we've learned a lot. I think the big thing is we've talked about this in an all-encompassing evaluation, he goes on to say. The highlights from this are mostly that he kept getting pressed about what the press saw in the one day that they were there, correct? And he did confirm that, Sanders has taken 11 on 11 reps, that it was just one day, and that he would take 11 on 11 reps on Wednesday when they were back. The rest of this is pretty much, Kevin, have you noticed, just Shador and Dillon specifically in just a month's time? Have you noticed a difference specifically with those two? Says, yeah, they're both doing great. They're both wired to get in early, stay late, put in ever work as required. They're sponges in the meeting room, which I think is really fun for me. In my vantage point, I get to sit there and watch the two young guys look over, and there's Joe Flacco, 4 years old, won a Super Bowl. There's Kenny Pickett just going into year 4, but first-round draft pick that's been on a couple teams, won a Super Bowl last year. There's Deshaun Watson, had a ton of success in his career. They can feed off of all of those guys. So that's the thing. I'm really, it's fun for me to watch them get better by just listening. Once again, Pete, him bringing up Watson in the quarterback room.
I don't read anything into it other than appeasing sort of the situation and not getting criticized for not mentioning him because previously he had mentioned he said that there are 4 quarterbacks, and people have been quick to point out there are actually 5. No, there are 4. No one gives a shit about the other one. So there's a lot of things that I took away from this. First, I found out that ESPN's graphic was a complete fraud based on this question, the questions that were asked. Because or I should say ESPN 850 or whatever they are, has no idea how teams label periods. So they put out that graphic with the 4 quarterbacks, and they said this is how they did during team periods. What we found out is that Shador Sanders had not taken any team period reps because team is 11 on 11.
Oh, yeah. Grossi explained that those were Grossi statistics, right? Grossi explained that those statistics were him gathering 7 on 7 and 11 on 11 reps together, and he puts those statistics together, which I went crazy about last week, saying you can't determine anything from the statistics in these practices. It's absurd to even be taking them, A, and B, it's one day that you're there. And C, you don't know what the quarterback's looking for. An incompletion could be more important than a completion if he's getting through his reads the right way or shows an understanding of the offense. You don't know what the coach is actually looking for on each individual play, which Stefanski kind of mentioned in here.
And, I think the idea of taking stats on these practices is dumb on its face. I understand why it was done because it did exactly what was intended. But the difference between 11 on 11 and 7 on 7 is enormous. Never mind the fact that if you are really good against 3s and 4s, it's not the same as being good against 1s and 2s. There's a lot of context missing. Obviously, the reads component, and if you just put, the raw numbers, if a receiver drops the ball, it just goes into completion. Likewise, if a quarterback completes a ball from the 1 foot line into the end zone, is counted as a touchdown. So it gives you this false impression of what these stats mean. They're utterly meaningless to me. I don't. There's this element. There's this rush to sort of produce a depth chart, and everything that I've in listening to Kevin Stefanski, I don't think they have any interest in setting one
No.
until training camp. For example, I heard Mary Kay Cabot say today that the Browns should have a pretty good idea who their top 2 quarterbacks are by minicamp, and that's theoretically possible, but it really basically says that the rookies don't matter. If you believe that, or if the Browns come to that conclusion, it would mean that the rookies have no shot. That you're basically going with the veterans at that point, because the rookies are not going to do enough to convince anyone that they're ready for meaningful reps in a larger sort of sample size. I mean, even if the Browns took a quarterback in the first round, you would be really hard pressed to come away with a real good evaluation and say, oh, based on them doing some OTAs and 7-on-7 stuff, they're ready to go. 7-on-7 is designed for the offense to be successful. There's a reason the pass rush exists. There's a reason that there are guys in the way, potentially trying to deflect passes and all that and obstruct viewing lanes. 7-on-7, you can throw through the line and complete passes. It's meaningless. I mean, it's a useful exercise to sort of working in address coverages and all those things without the line in there. But in terms of like an evaluation tool, they're not going to really know what particularly Gabriel and Sanders can offer until July and August. I would even include Kenny Pickett in that. Kenny Pickett can impress based on the fact that he's been experienced enough to sort of be around the league a little bit. But Joe Flacco has a commanding advantage in a month because the offense may be slightly different. They may be doing a few things differently than they were with since Tommy Rees has been hired as the offensive coordinator. But like they have to digest the playbook. All 3 of these guys, all 4 really, but it's not as important for Flacco. All 3 of these guys are going to get homework to work on, things to improve upon when they go on summer break, when they go from the middle of June until they get back in July. And the Browns are going to, when they come back for training camp, there are going to be things that the Browns are looking for. Were you able to improve on these things? It may just be a mechanical change that they've made. It may be just having a full command of the offense. Like so much of, look, the competition stuff absolutely matters, and I think I've heard Kevin Stefanski say this, but I'm not entirely sure. But I know I've heard him say this in the past. So much of this is being able to get in the huddle, have command of the offense, be able to put guys in the right places, and get the operation to go at this point.
Yep.
We're not going to have a good feel for what this is going to look like until pads come on. The game plays in pads. And even then, obviously, they can't hit the quarterback, but still, there's no pads. How are we going to make an accurate assessment? So if Mary Kay is proven true, then Shedeur Sanders and Dylan Gabriel don't matter as far as the starting conversation goes. It becomes antithetical to the idea of a truly open competition if you're saying we're going to know by that. Or Mary Kay is basically saying that those guys have, that based on her viewing, and she's perfectly valid to have her opinion of it, is that those guys don't have a chance.
She saw one day of OTAs and said definitively, I watched her do it after that one day that they saw last week, and said, it's clear that Shedeur Sanders is 4th on the depth chart. There is not a depth chart at this point. And you can't make assumptions like that. Her assumption is that because he wasn't in 11 on, he didn't take any 11 on 11 snaps, right? Right. But as I pointed out on Thursday, she wasn't there the day before or the day after. And Stefanski has been steadfast in saying that he's going to rotate these guys through. Like, they're going to take different amount of snaps each day. It just so happened the day they were there, he didn't take team reps. He clarifies that he has since then. I think it's just wild to be making sweeping guesses on the depth chart after watching one practice when you haven't seen any of the other. And to Stefanski's point in this interview, they're going back all the way through phase 2, phase 1. They've been there the whole time. They haven't just been there for 3 days. They've been in the building working. They've been working out. They've been watching everything they've been doing now for a month plus, right? Phase 1, phase 2. Obviously, this matters more. They're out on the field, offense versus defense, but they've been watching. It's an all-encompassing evaluation, is what he keeps coming back to.
Well, the thing that jumps out to me is if you are the Browns and you want to sort of quiet the noise as much as possible, you do what they did, which is to put out the order of guys in the way they did it, where Shedeur Sanders is definitively fourth, and he doesn't get to do everything everybody else does. Now you're going to have some people that complain that that's not fair or whatever, that this isn't a true competition. I've already seen this crap. We're refusing to let Shedeur Sanders just do it, which is incredibly frustrating because his attitude has been phenomenal through this whole thing.
Amazing.
But if you're the Browns and let's say the first day the media comes out there and the Browns are just going through this process and Shedeur Sanders is the second quarterback up, everybody's going to jump to some conclusion that, oh, this means Shedeur Sanders is, in a position to jump to the deals, because Kevin Stefanski has said that, even though I keep telling you guys don't read anything to the order, you're going to read everything into the order, and they are. So if in some ways, because the media can't control themselves on this, and I get it to a certain point, they are going to take what they have and try to extrapolate and take as much information as much as possible. I mean, if you want sort of the ultimate sort of they're just like us moments, today, both Daniel Oyafasi of ESPN, who I think is a really good reporter, and Zach Jackson, who's has his opinions, but I think he's professional in what he does, were doing what everybody else does, which is they were analyzing clips and finding guys on the tape, the little bit of clips they had, and having to go through it and doing what everybody else does. That is how sort of desperate everybody is to try to get information on this. So in that sense, and even though you're at practice for one day, you are basically looking through this whole thing through a keyhole to try to formulate a huge picture. So if, let's say, for example, tomorrow, tomorrow being Wednesday, that they go up there and they give Joe Flacco a day off, and they want to put Gabriel and Shedeur up first to have those guys go with the one, against the ones and twos, whatever. Everybody's going to read into that. There will be some people who have the presence of mind to say, clearly they just want to see what these guys can do and get as much information as possible. But if I'm the Browns, there's every incentive for me to not to do that. I would do that on the day that there's no media there, because I want to be able to control what they can see for the time being, so people don't lose their minds and come up with whatever they are. So in at least in terms of public viewing, it'd certainly be interesting to see more of, from my own selfish standpoint, I'd rather see, I'm perfectly happy to see Joe Flacco compete and everything, but I'd rather see all the other three guys do stuff. But if I'm the Browns, I'm not going to do that. And I had the same attitude with Deshaun Watson last year when he's rehabbing from the injury. Why would I want to show much of anything to the media when I can, they scheduled his days off, his first couple of days off, to be on days that the media was going to be there. There's just this desperate want to jump to the ending from a contest. June 3rd, as we record this, it's going to be June 4th. There is every chance that their Browns are not going to know definitively who the starter is, unless it's Joe Flacco and everybody else just isn't close, before we get to joint practices, the first set of joint practices, and potentially even later than that. Now, I think joint practices are probably the unofficial deadline the Browns have sort of in their heads, because at that point, I think they want to be able to start really planning against other teams and getting ready for the season. There are people who think preseason is going to matter. I'm going to tell you right now, it's not, because if you're doing joint practices against two teams, you're doing two practices against the Eagles and one practice against the Panthers. You have now created every reason not to put anyone meaningful into the game on that end of that week. You've done the real work in the competition. far less reason to put anybody in harm's way in that, and just hand the games, which is what I want anyway, to Shador and Gabriel at that point. Because I've seen Kenny Pickett throw a perfect QB rating in preseason, and it meant absolutely nothing. So I don't care to see him in the preseason. I'm more interested in seeing what the rookies can do in their development. So, yeah, I mean, this is Kevin Stefanski's desperately trying to say, look, just let these guys do it. Let these guys figure it out. And there's certain elements in the media who just absolutely refuse.
Yeah. To your point, though, about, they're just like us or everybody, evaluating clips and drawing conclusions based on one day. I would just say you have to have the wherewithal if you're in a position of someone that can sensationalize everything, like, which we know some people want to do, but like somebody has to have a level head and say, and restrain themselves from jumping to conclusions based on one day of practice. Like, you've got to be able to do that. I mean, come on. You've been covering the team for years. You've got to be able to step back and say, we can't tell anything from one day of practice. We don't know what happened the day before or after. This is what we saw. It's a snapshot. That's what it is. Here's what we saw. Take what you will from it.
If I'm gonna pop off based on what I saw the first day of OTAs and some of the stuff I've seen, I would say here comes Cameron Thomas, the edge rusher who cooked the third and fourth offensive tackles, and he looked really good doing it. But they don't have pads on, and it doesn't mean a whole lot. And let these guys figure it out. Not everybody's going to grow at the same pace. For example, today Carson's again looking through the keyhole, looking through the clips on a highlight where Kenny Pickett throws a touchdown pass or whatever you want to call it for that to I think Caden Davis or whatever, and they freeze frame to note that Carson Schwarzenegger's out of the field with the ones. It's like, yeah, okay, cool. Like, I mean, noteworthy. I mean, Devin Bush was in court, so maybe that had something to do with it. But like, ultimately, this is where we want to go. But getting some work with the ones doesn't necessarily mean he's ready to do it. But we just want to see him get exposure and see how he's able to grow and handle it and process. And Carson Schwarzenegger is a really smart guy by all accounts. So maybe he's able to pick it up a little bit quicker than some of these other guys. Whereas, position like quarterback, it's going to take a minute for some of these guys. They're processing a lot of information. They have a lot on their plate. And we're trying to rush to judgment too quickly. In the same way that, like, Quinshon Judkins is your running back one, and that's probably how it's going to work. But I just think you're better off waiting to see. Or like when I complained last week and wrote about this week, people clamoring for Mason Graham has to be a starter. I don't know what that means for a defensive lineman, unless he's a superstar and you can put him on the field for 65% of plays. It doesn't really matter, but like that is this weird expectation people have set.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, we just cannot help ourselves in some ways. The only conclusions I'm willing to draw is Jerry Jeudy's really good in OTAs. He cooked last year. He's going to cook this year. And Joe Flacco throws a really pretty ball.
Yeah. This exchange was interesting right here, and I thought worth noting at the end. So, Deontay Johnson was not there last Wednesday, which was a little bit disappointing. And so in this press conference at the golf outing, towards the end, he gets asked, do you expect to see Deontay Johnson? Stefanski replies, you guys are out there tomorrow, right? ? And whoever it was goes, Wednesday. And he goes, okay, see you Wednesday. So I don't know what that exchange means. Here's the interesting thing about Johnson. I've seen he was there for at least parts or large parts of phase 1 and 2. So I don't know why he wasn't there at the OTAs, because he was in all the team pictures, the pictures of them lifting, the pictures of them out on the field running routes. He was there for the offseason program up until the OTA. So I don't know why he wasn't there last Wednesday, but him missing at this point would be kind of a bad sign unless he had an excuse of some sort.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, Joel Bitonio was there for phase 1 and 2, and he's not there for this stuff. And for him, he's trying to take care of his body in the same way that, I don't need Myles Garrett putting any extra mileage on his feet or his body at this point.
Different story
Deontay Johnson, a little bit
Deontay
different,
Johnson.
obviously, is one, he's a wide receiver, and two, he is trying to learn a new offense and trying to integrate himself to, earn playing time in a spot. But life happens. Greg Newsome missed time for something related to his new baby. We like to assume that not being there means, you don't want to be there, or, you are somehow derelict in your duty. There are other things there. Certainly, I think of all the people who are not there for OTAs, his is the one that stands out to me the most for all the reasons I just laid out. So I'll be curious to see if he gets there, because look, the better he can play, the more peace of mind people will have with this wide receiver group. If Cedric Tillman can pick up where he's left off from those 3 games before the injury, Jerry Jeudy continues to look good. David Njoku has not been there, so you've seen a lot of Harold Fannin, which good for Harold Fannin. He's getting a lot of opportunities, but like Deontay Johnson, of all the moves they've made, has sort of the largest range of outcomes, from he may not be on the team next week to he could actually help this team and be a contributor and maybe lift the receiving unit to a point where we're not sitting there dreading it going into the season. So yeah, he's the one where, maybe there's a perfectly compelling reason for him not to be there or something along those lines. No mention of injury or anything else, but yeah, he's the one I would like to see. I would like to see him catching balls from these quarterbacks and trying to figure it out, because other than him signing in some photos, we have not seen or really heard from him.
Yeah, that would be huge, because, as we look at this wide receiver room, and we talked about it a lot last week on the depth chart, like there's not a lot there that I'm curious to see beyond Jamari Thrash, and Deontay Johnson can really elevate the floor of this room if he could just keep his head on straight. You know what I mean? So, I was really kind of hoping and praying that he finds a way to do that in what appears to be maybe his last chance. So we'll follow that as we see fit. So I would just say this, to those listening, expect more nonsense tomorrow. Take it with a grain of salt. Okay. Anybody starts throwing out stats and stuff like that from OTAs, please take it with a grain of salt. It's one day of practice. All right. This is Andrew Siciliano on the Rich Eisen show, filling in for him, kind of talking about some of the things that we are talking about. A guy that's in the building every day now, Siciliano is, as he does a podcast from the building, and is there as the long-term announcer now, right? So here is Andrew on the Rich Eisen show.
Reporting of quarterback completion numbers from OTAs is silly. I'll put it that way. I'll clean it up. Is silly. However, there is an insatiable desire to know. Like, I want to know, and you want to know, and the fans want to know. So I get it. Like, we're feeding the beast, and without fans that want to know, none of us have jobs. So I get it. Like, we're doing the right thing. Totally get it. I just caution against the over-analysis of these numbers.
That's fair.
Like, I'll give you a perfect example. Let's transition to the Browns. For those who don't know, I do the games for the Browns on the radio here. I am not there this week for OTAs. They have an OTA today, and the Browns will be back on the practice field tomorrow. And Kevin Stefanski and Jim Schwartz and Bubba Ventrone and a bunch of players will be talking tomorrow, as they did last Wednesday when Joe Flacco's comments were totally blown out of proportion. I was there for rookie minicamp. I saw both days of practice. I stood on the field and watched Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders throw the football. They both had really good moments. We're like, all right, I see it. There it is. And they both had moments where like, yeah, they're rookies. Perfect example. Shedeur's very first snap, his very first day at rookie minicamp, he bobbled it coming away from center because, hey, you're under center. That's different for most college quarterbacks making the transition. And then with the rush getting to him because he was late getting away from the line, he backpedaled, and then kind of like lofted it like 15 yards down, like to the sideline. And if that were a game, you were like, oh my God, it would have been like a disaster pick. Like,
Sure.
And you're like, oh my God. But that was the very first play. And from that point on, he looked great. And then he was throwing touchdowns. He was throwing back shoulders to local kids who ended up getting signed on the spot because they were tryout players. So all of the above is true. Both he and Dillon Gabriel had good moments, and they had rookie moments. Also true, both of them have been exemplary in the building and on the podium, both in the classroom, in the community, with their teammates, with all the staffers in the building. No one's saying a bad word. I've done sit-downs with both Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur, blown away by them both. Thought they were great. I knew Dillon a little bit. I did an Oregon game last year, had a production meeting with him last year, had interviewed him previously as well on the radio. I'd pay the guy to be my therapist. I think he's that mature. Shedeur had never met him. Obviously worked with Dad back in the day, broke the ice with Dad. Was very impressed by him. He's got $1 million smile, but there's some deep thoughts behind that smile. He's got a lot to say. He's introspective. I think he's got a great, broader perspective on life. At one point during the interview, you could see it on all the Cleveland Browns social channels on their YouTube. I tweeted the whole thing as well. I put it on Threads as well. I put it on Blue Sky as well. I thought at one point it was really telling. He looked at the camera and kind of spoke to young athletes, kind of, took a left turn and, cautioned young athletes about the perils of social media. I was beyond impressed with my first interaction with the guy. Spent about 15 minutes with him. Very, very impressed. But back to your initial question. The reporting of what happens in OTAs breathlessly and somehow using that to determine on a show, which is what we're doing right now, understandably, somehow determining right now who's going to start week one is beyond foolish. Mm-hmm. It is so foolish. It is June 3rd. Yeah. Okay? It is June 3rd. Well, take the Browns, for example. They have a joint practice with the Eagles. They have a joint practice with the Panthers. They have 3 preseason games that this year truly do mean something. Truly do. Let it play out. They will each, those rookie quarterbacks, and Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco, they will each have a moments to shine. Okay? And look at Sam Darnold's red zone picks yesterday. Are they bad for Sam, or is it, hey, good for Julian Love? Let's praise the defender who made one of those picks.
Sure.
Dillon Gabriel's pick day 2 at rookie minicamp. Do you knock Dillon Gabriel? Yeah, he could have made a better throw. Or do you praise the 33rd overall pick, Carson Schlesinger, the linebacker at UCLA, who made a nice play? There's another side to that bad play for that quarterback. How about the first pick night 2 getting a pick in his second practice in the NFL? It goes both ways.
Yeah, but it ain't about that.
But let's scream on TV about how the quarterbacks should be seated on the depth chart. Yeah. For who, for what? It don't matter.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show live.
I thought it was really well done by Andrew, kind of encompassing a lot of the thoughts that many of us have had in regards to the reaction to all this.
Well, I mean, the thing is, Sam Darnold throwing picks in the end zone is interesting because let's say Sam Darnold is trying to test his limits and push the envelope to see just what he can get away with. Some of those are going to probably get picked off, but it might make you better in the long run. That, you wouldn't expect that to necessarily be happening with the 2 rookies, but they are going to have to figure that out. And you're going to learn a lot more from failing than you are from succeeding in that respect. So these are reasons why I don't care about rookie stats. What I want to see is trends. What I want to see is not where they are on June 3rd. I want to see where they are on August 3rd. I want to see, have they gotten better? Are they making are they if they're making mistakes, are they correcting those mistakes? Are they still making the same misreads or whatever in 2 months as they are now? Hopefully the answer is no. Hopefully they are making progress in the areas that matter, so that they can figure out some of the nuances of the game. So contextless stats, on some level, it's great. Like Shedeur Sanders had really good numbers based on whatever 7-on-7 reps he did. Like good. I mean, the hope would be that if he did well, then hopefully that like allows him to move on to something else. Whatever the next challenging thing is, the next thing the Browns want to see him. Likewise, Dylan Gabriel, he made a pick. He threw a pick according to the statistics. Was it a bad read? Did somebody jump in front of a pass? Did a ball get tipped and caught? Whatever. Did he learn from it? And ultimately, I'm more interested in that than I am statistics on this. I mean, it's great that if it's Tony Grossi, he wants to be the next Elliott Shores Park. I know they're getting ready to put him in the Hall of Fame for his contributions to the game of taking stats in practice. But that's the only reason anyone really pays attention to Elliott Shores Park is because it's sort of a joke that he always takes Eagles quarterback stats at practices. They don't mean anything, but he does it, and that's sort of what he gets notoriety for. It engages people, fine, but ultimately it doesn't tell you anything.
Yeah, no, I don't believe it does tell you anything. The stuff there on from Andrew, pretty good, interesting stuff. Anything to take away from what he said about sitting down with both guys in their interviews?
No, I mean,
kind of.
Look, as I've said all along, I think the Browns have drafted what has been a pretty charismatic, group of players that seem to, are good on camera and seem to have personalities and everything else. What's he going to say? I mean, he works for the team. Even if Dylan Gabriel turned and punched him in the face, he's probably not going to say that to a national audience here. But look, I mean, it's not difficult for me to watch these guys speak and whatever and get a sense of like the way they process. I mean, Dylan Gabriel's got a little bit of a prick in him. If you saw him sort of take his his clip of him doing the golf stuff and making some great drive, and he says, put that shit on Twitter. That type. He's got a little edge to him, which I enjoy, and he's got his sort of like, just his own process for how he wants to do things. And Shedeur's got sort of, his own charisma, and you see like, I don't know if it necessarily tells you anything all that important, but when the Browns put up these goofy random topics and have people walk by, which player would you want to give a TED Talk? And Dylan Sampson's like, Shedeur, because he's got opinions on everything. That's fine. Like it's interesting because it gives you sort of a feel of what's going on. I have no reason to believe that either guy is doing a poor job in the building. Ultimately, if one of these guys gets cut or traded, we're going to learn a lot. But until then, unless there's something we see, and that won't really happen until, training camp is open and media is there every day and they can see something happen that stands out. You're largely getting sort of the best of these people at this point. Everybody's enjoying it. We're not anywhere near the dog days of summer, unless you're at the Atlanta Falcons OTAs where there's fights. But everybody's just like loving life right now for the most part. It's everybody's enjoying this. Everybody's just having fun with it. So we're sort of in that little bit of that honeymoon period with players. It won't be until, this is the fifth practice in the course of a week. It's really hot. This guy's been riding you all day, or you've been, he did something that you didn't think was toward, and you're.
Did you see, Pete, the Jerry Judy mic'd up session?
I did, yeah.
That I found rather impressive, that he was kind of taking a leadership role in the wide receiver room with a void there. At least it appeared that he was attempting to. Now, of course, he knows he's mic'd up, so
There's that. I mean, having seen Jerry Judy sort of just operate, I think that's just what he is. Like, he's just he's a guy where if it pops in his head, it's probably coming out. And he's, it works for him in terms of when he's enjoying life, and he's been really happy with the Browns. It may have been a negative when, at the end with the Broncos, where he basically felt like they screwed him over. He's got the security he wants with the contract. He's clearly the best. He's clearly the top receiver. It's sort of his, it's his job. And if he wants to take on that role, great. But for again, I have the same read I have on all these other guys. Loving life right now. We'll see what happens when stuff gets a little more competitive, a little get more of a grind. But the Browns are perfectly happy to put out the best of Jerry Judy, and I'm sure it doesn't hurt their feelings if it rubs Broncos fans the wrong way that he's having the success he is with how little they had to give up for him.
Yeah. All right. In Sicilianos, you're watching the React, by the way, on the OBR streaming network. My name is Brad Ward. That's Pete Smith. In the Siciliano interview, he did mention people taking Flacco's comments the right way. I wrote about it today. Here is the clip of Chris Canty going crazy about Joe Flacco's comments.
When a young player is brought in, any position, any team, to mentor the young player.
Yes.
Explain what you mean by that.
Because mentoring the young player is only going to make that player better, which thereby makes the team better.
Mm-hmm. Now,
you're only as strong as your weakest link. So the whole point of the exercise is that everybody makes everyone better. That's why you go out there and you practice. You're making each other better. Mm-hmm. It's what you're supposed to do. So you do that with the reps on the practice field with the competition, but you also do that by sharing notes and coaching points in the film room.
Is it different? Question on this.
Ridiculous. It's a ridiculous answer from Joe Flacco.
But is it different when there's only one
No,
position?
It's not different.
Meaning
No,
your
it's
position,
not different.
You could play multiple guys.
It's not different because there's no guarantee that Joe Flacco is going to be healthy for 17 games, especially at 40 years old. It's stupid to not consider trying to do everything that you can to coach these other guys up. Nobody is saying that you have to do your job at a lesser level in terms of performing on the field. But if you can happen to impart some wisdom onto those guys who you're spending 12, 14, 16 hours a day with in training camp, then why wouldn't you do that? And here's the other part that nobody wants to acknowledge, but I'm going to go ahead and say it out loud. Just because you're mentoring somebody doesn't mean you can't be the starting quarterback either. Just because you're mentoring doesn't mean that you're relegated to backup status. Mm-hmm. So his answer is nonsensical. And I know I hate going so hard on one of my former teammates, but it's the dumbest thing that I've heard. Well, one of the dumbest things I've heard Joe Flacco ever say.
One of.
The irony here, Pete, is that was one of the dumbest rants I've ever heard, because Canty clearly didn't listen to the soundbite or read the quote. It would have taken him 30 seconds to do that research, and in doing so would have understood that Flacco literally laid out both sides of why he would be taken wrong if he answered the question in one way or the other. He talked about how he does talk about his experiences to his teammates, and he hopes that they, hear him, and it's natural for him to do that. But he can't say one thing or the other, or else the media will take him and take exactly his words and use it against him, which is exactly what Canty is doing playing perfectly into the cliche that he described. It's ironic, hypocritical, and he sounds like a moron.
Yeah, I mean, I agree 100%. I mean, he is beating the hell out of a straw man, the argument that doesn't exist. And yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is it's the whole thing just proves Flacco's point. Whatever from his standpoint, whatever I say is the wrong answer in terms of addressing this as a question. And ultimately, I thought the most sort of important quote that Joe Flacco sort of mentioned was that you mentor, but your mentoring is just by being yourself, being a professional, being operating and being sort of open about the process and being Joe Flacco has said specifically he wants to be a good teammate, which I think is far more instructive than saying I want to be a mentor, because it does come with certain connotations. To say you want to be a mentor, that doesn't mean you're wrong. I mean, it sounds different to say I want to be a mentor than if I want to say I want to be a good teammate and I want to be a leader. Mentoring does have some negative connotations. Good teammate and good leader both have nothing but positive connotations. So, and even in that sort of back and forth with reporters, I don't want to say he got into it, but he sort of like caught a reporter doing the thing that he was talking about live and in that moment. And he was, very cordial in that moment, but still, while still making the point that like, this is why it's just, it's a question that is unhelpful, that doesn't serve anything. So from Flacco's standpoint, be a good teammate, be a good leader, and it's going to take care of itself. I don't worry about that stuff, because if he's just, as I've sort of written about, if he's just exactly who he is, who he's been for now into his 18th year, guys are going to benefit from it. He has taken care of his body over the course of this long to be able to do this into now age 40. He's won a Super Bowl. He's played a ton of football. He's seen basically everything you could possibly see. And that extends to things like, how does he handle his teammates? How does he command respect in the huddle? How does the operation work when he's in there? If you're not a fool, you're paying attention to those things as he's doing them on the field, and that is going to have a benefit if you just pay attention. He doesn't, as I've said before, he doesn't need to go to whether it's Shedeur Sanders or Dylan Gabriel and put his arm around them and say, this is how you do it. And here's the problem. If he does that with one, if media sees him do that with, say, Dylan Gabriel, and they don't see it with Shedeur Sanders, then it's its own controversy that he's sort of now picked one over the other. This is what the type of content you get on June 3rd. Baseball season is sort of going along. The NBA playoffs are in a holding pattern. The NHL playoffs are in a holding pattern. Neither final has started, and you got to come up with something. So you have a strong opinion about nothing. And whether it's this, whether it's Myles Garrett not being at OTAs, you got to come up with something to fill airtime. So this is the thing.
I guess it's just, for me, it struck me as embarrassing that like the guy couldn't take, I mean, it would take 30 seconds of research to realize that you sound like an imbecile, and you're on a major network. Like, you can't take the 30 seconds to read the quote and see, you know what I mean?
Well, it's worse than that. To me, it's worse because Joe Flacco is a former teammate.
Exactly.
You have some sense of him as a person.
You know who he is. Yeah.
I would think that you'd want to make sure that you get the full context before you go in on a guy you played with. I think in that sense that Chris Canty, it reduces himself in that sense, that you are now trying to use your former teammate to take pot shots. I think that minimizes you in some ways, which is unfortunate. Chris Canty, a UVA guy, he's clearly smart enough to know better. So that part of it is sort of disappointing.
It was very disappointing. Yeah. So, anyways, crazy though that he can explain exactly what he means very eloquently. The best I've ever heard anybody answer that question, and still have this kind of a fallout is bizarre. And he's not the only one. I've seen articles aggregated off of basically that idea that basically he said he doesn't want to be a mentor with no context around it, right?
Sure. Now, and wrong as that is, and missing the context, and ultimately, hopefully, people are smart enough to go to better places to get their information. Chris Canty is a teammate, or was a teammate.
Yeah.
You would think, even if Joe Flacco said it wrong, and you want to be critical, I would think that Chris Canty could get on the phone and reach out to Joe Flacco and figure it out, and find out what he meant. That's where this feels very careerist, half-cocked, and just trying to, again, one, more than anything, fill airtime in a slow sports period. But again, I would think that would be more important than getting this stupid clip. To me, I would, if it was me, I would, and I knew this guy, and I'd worked with them, whatever, I would want to reach out and get their side of it before I go on this. But hey, that is the media landscape we live in. Check the Mike likes to call it the shouty shows. I think of it as, all these things as sports fight, however you call it. It's not, you're not interested in getting full context. You're interested in having takes and being louder than everybody else.
Yeah. And I mean, just the irony in calling him nonsensical and the dumbest thing he's ever said is crazy. Canty, it's lazy too. It's just lazy, really, as well. All right, moving on. So a big deal was made this week, Pete. Over the years, PFF has kind of always had the Browns, going back, a couple years, they had the Browns roster ranked in their top 5 most talented rosters when they would come out. Just 2-3 years ago, this was, right? They were like top 5 most talented roster in the NFL. And I think before the 23 season, even coming into the 24 season, they were one of the most talented rosters in the NFL before the 3-14 and all that, right? This year, they are dead last, ranked by PFF. Now, PFF, we should note, has changed hands, who's running things over there. I don't know if that has anything to do with it or not, but I find this kind of absurd because so much of the roster is the same to a certain extent. I mean, your cornerstone pieces are still really the same, are they not? So either way, we'll play these clips here. First, we've got a couple clips on this topic, but this was first one is not so much to do with that, but this was Zach Jackson on 92.3 The Fan today with the morning show, talking about the Browns, and then that topic first. So 2 separate clips here.
But it's a talented team. If that offensive line stays healthy and plays together, they're going to move some people, right? If they can run the ball a little bit. I'm not convinced this is a top 3 pick at all, or I'm convinced this is not a bottom 3, is what I'm trying to say. Because they were so bad at so many things last year that even just being functional, they'll win some games. And I think Joel said it yesterday. They just weren't good enough last year, early in the year, to capitalize on some things and win games. There's a million reasons, but they just weren't good enough. And then at the end, they weren't even trying. Mm-hmm. So in the middle was a functional football team. They scored $1 million and lost to Denver. They beat Pittsburgh. They beat the Ravens. They got embarrassed by the Chargers, who were a playoff team. They were right there. I remember having this discussion with you guys, I think at the trade deadline. Had they just not given away the Giants or the Raiders game, they would have been a playoff contender by number, not by reality, right? Yeah. So, I mean, look, it all depends on quarterback, and it all depends on where you are around that trade deadline, which happens to be their bye week, and what they decide, that they have to do. But yeah, I mean, I think I picked 5-11-1 when the schedule came out, and I think it's more likely in 4-6 than 2-4. But I think a lot of things are in play because we just don't know what's going to happen with the quarterback, and if they don't score points early, like they could be 1-6 to start the season.
I love that he threw a tie in there.
Yeah, sure, why not?
Any thoughts on what Zach had to say there about the team?
Yeah, I just think people underestimate just how much Deshaun Watson killed this football team last year. Now, having said that, they're not good overall. It's never a good sign when we haven't done anything yet, and I'm already thinking about 3 things that I'd like to see them draft next year. That's not good. Like right off the rip, quarterback. And that's why the Browns are going to be ranked where they are. They don't have the answer quarterback. Now, here again, this is another situation where if Shedeur Sanders is the 33rd pick, I can't help but wonder if they have a different view on it than we're sort of going back and saying, well, he was picked in the 5th round, so he's somehow diminished as a player. Regardless, the quarterback situation isn't very good. And at this point, even if they took Shedeur, I think in some ways it would be an upset if the Browns are not in the quarterback market next year. Offensive tackle. I like what DeJuan Jones can be, but he has to do it. He has to stay healthy. And then Jack Conklin is half the line on the last year of his deal. Now, if Jack Conklin stays healthy and plays well, as he's more than capable, and they re-sign him for another year, I'd be okay with that. But the offensive tackle class that's going to be in 2026 is very strong. I suspect if the Browns don't have to trade their picks to get one, that one of those picks is going to be an offensive tackle. We'll see if one of these edge guys can step up, or Isaiah McGuire just becomes that full service dude across from Myles Garrett. But even if he does, I'm still going to want another edge rusher because you just can't have enough. Joe Tryon's on a 1-year deal. Okoronkwo's on the last year of his deal and may not be here before this season starts. Alex Wright's on the last year of his deal, may not be here before the season starts. So unless a guy like Aiden Huntington, an undrafted rookie, is going to really own a role, every reason to believe that you could be in the market for that. So, if you were
think wide receiver is more,
wide receiver is obviously a huge element. So, like, I have named 4 premium positions right off the rip, and depending on how this whole thing goes, corner could be,
certainly
an area they have to address. So even if the Browns get to keep both their picks and use them, in the way they want, you can easily be, both 1st-round picks, 2nd-round pick, and 3rd-round pick are theoretically accounted for before we've even done anything. Now, the idea that they're the 32nd rated roster in the league is ridiculous.
Yes.
Unless, and correct me if I'm wrong, the Tennessee Titans and the New Orleans Saints are still in the NFL.
No, they are. They're still there.
Now, take Cam Ward off the table. Who do you want off either of those teams?
I don't know. I'd have to think about it. I want Alvin
probably sit there
Kamara.
and go, hey, I'd like Chris Olave, or I'd like,
Yeah.
But you don't want him to be your number 1 receiver. You want him to be the number 2 receiver, or you're taking the top receiver off the Titans and making him your number 2 receiver. But you want Jerry Jeudy over both of them. Maybe you want, a Jeffrey Simmons or something off the Titans, but the Browns are so loaded at defensive tackle, you may not be worried about it. But the Titans' edge room is ass. It's awful. They have nothing. There are just so many pieces on that team that are god awful, and they're going to stink. And their best case scenario is that their offensive line is average, and that Cam Ward is going to somehow be so good initially. And I'm not saying this can't happen, that he's going to carry them in a way that I don't think is really possible. The New England Patriots stink. Their offense is horrendous outside of Drake May. And again, because they have Drake May, they're going to get the benefit of the doubt. But their offensive line is bad. Their receiver room is bad. their running back room is at least interesting. They've got a tight end, but they're bad. And their defense is not like great either. It's fine. I would take the Browns defense over the Patriots defense. Like, so you get into this area of being hyperbolic with some of these things. And like, if the Browns defensive line is as good as it can be this year, Martin Emerson and Greg Newsome are probably going to look a whole lot better at the end of this year. If Cedric Tillman plays the way that he was capable of through those, the 3-game stretch, it's going to look a whole lot different at the end of this year. If DeJuan Jones plays, stays healthy and plays well, it's going to look a whole lot different if he plays this year. And then the other element with this, and PFF can't account for this, which I'm not going to blame them for, is the Browns are counting on significant contributions from young players. Mike Hall and Jawan Briggs, small sample size, but very talented players. They can't sort of account for that and go, these guys are great. They can only go on what they've got. Even if they want to project forward and say, Mike, like check the Mike, Sam Monson or Steve Palazzolo. One of them picked Mike Hall to break out. It's a perfectly reasonable thing to say. He's got to go out and do it. He's got to stay on the field. Mason Graham hasn't played it down yet. Carson Schwarzenegger hasn't played it down yet. You lost JOK. You've lost Nick Chubb. So you're going to sit there and look at this and go, man, this team is missing a lot of things. And they are. The offense is not very good. So, they're not the worst team in the league, but like, I can't really make a compelling argument that they aren't in the bottom part of the league. But what's more important isn't where they are ranked right now. It's how you feel about this team, both in the season and then after it.
Sure.
Did a running back room that is basically going to be 2 rookies and Jerome Ford, who's fine, live up to the expectations and become sort of have the ability to sort of carry this offense in a way that the Browns haven't run the ball at all in the last couple of years? Are the young defensive linemen going to step up and be good players? Is Carson Schwarzenegger going to step in and play well? Is Harold Fannin going to be a contributor? Because it seems like they really want him to be a contributor as a rookie. Obviously, he has to go out and do it. But between these last 2 drafts, they are expecting a lot of these guys to step up. So whereas some of these other teams don't have the sort of young core that the Browns are banking on to be sort of able to carry them forward, that this whole thing could look, from the Browns standpoint, must look different by the end of the year. So right this second, I don't care if they put him 32nd. I think it's stupid and preposterous, but the argument boils down to one thing. If the Browns had put Cam Ward on the Browns, this thing looks completely different. Obviously, Cam Ward has to go and prove it himself, but whatever. But that's where the entire projection for the Tennessee Titans is based on. Cam Ward is going to be a good quarterback because he's the top-rated quarterback, this, that, and the other. So if we're sitting here next year and the Browns have just taken a top quarterback and looks really promising, that this whole roster is going to look completely different, because that's the difference. The Washington Commanders were awful, and then Jaden Daniels changed the whole thing. Like, the Washington Commanders still have a lot of question marks, but that's what that position can do. That is how big of a deal it is. Otherwise, the Browns still have Myles Garrett and nobody else does. The Browns still have Denzel Ward, and few other teams can boast that level of talent. The Browns have a lot of players. Isaiah McGuire has a chance to be a star after being really, really good last year. They have a lot of players that can be really, really good for this team and carry them forward. But whatever. It is what it is. The Browns do not warrant the benefit of the doubt based on what they've done, both coming off last year where they only won 3 games. This is what happens when you only win 3 games. And then they've got to prove their development chops. They've got to prove, and hopefully what we're seeing in training, the practice stuff and practicing faster and guys talking about how it's more intense and all this other stuff is going to pay off for this team in a way that's going to see meaningful changes for this roster moving forward.
Yeah. Of course, this doesn't matter ultimately, but I guess my point is, and I get you're saying they don't deserve the benefit of the doubt, and they don't. But like, to your point earlier, so much of what last year was about 4, and Like, okay, they had them ranked like first 2 years ago. The secondary is exactly the same as 2 years ago. Their 3 starting quarters are exactly the same. Their offensive line is pretty much exactly the same as it was 2-3 years ago when they were ranked in the top 5. Their wide receiver room is not much different other than Amari Cooper's gone. Their running back room is different, but I could argue that it's going to be better. I mean, the defense, the defensive line, the edge room is the same. You still have Myles Garrett. You still have Denzel Ward as your elite corner. The second, it's all the same basically, except for that your defensive tackle room is now better.
Should be.
And you don't have a quarterback. You don't know who
Right.
your quarterback is, right?
Right.
So like that's why I
if
don't
I was to look
understand.
at if I was to compare this team to 2020, I would take the wide receiver room the Browns have now over the wide receiver room the Browns had in 2020. Neither one was good,
Right.
but I would absolutely take Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman over Jarvis Landry, Rashard Higgins, Kadarius Hodge.
Yeah.
So there is upside there, but and this is what I found interesting about what Check the Mike said about this, because I agree wholeheartedly. The NFL as a whole has gotten better at building rosters. So they made the argument, and I agree, that the Saints and the Titans are way below everybody else. But after that, like, it's, there isn't a huge difference between,
Sure.
10 spots. Whereas several years ago, there was a lot more space in terms of this. So like, they couldn't agree. I mean, they had basically the same teams in the top 5 rosters as well. But like, they have like the Buffalo Bills and the Baltimore Ravens in their top 5. Neither one of them has won the Super Bowl. It's that competitive a field. So when you look at it from that standpoint, they make the point that I 100% agree with. I look at the Browns schedule and I see it as daunting. However, I don't look at that schedule and go, they cannot win this game.
No.
And that, I think, is the important differentiation. Now, if their quarterback play is as bad as it could be and the running game doesn't get going and the offensive line looks bad, and I think part of the reason PFF ranked the Browns so low is because their offensive line was so bad last year relative to how they have been. And then you sit there and you go look at their ages and you go, oh man, they're getting older. And you're making the bet that they're basically not going to return to the form they had. I think they're going to be a lot better this year.
But just last year, just at the beginning of the year, they had their offensive line ranked in the top 5 offensive lines in the entire NFL.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and even then I thought that was a
bold,
extraordinarily bold and frankly erroneous way to look at it, because they were missing 3 guys to injuries. But I do think that group's going to be better than it was. Now, I say all this, and I still don't think nobody's going to be shocked if the Browns finish 4th in the division this year, and the upside is probably 3rd. I would be stunned if the Browns can. Some awful things would have to happen to the Ravens and to keep them from winning this division. You can make an argument for the Bengals. I have a hard time with the Steelers. Whatever.
Don't you think? Let me push back on that. Don't you think all it would take is one of these quarterbacks for it to click? Like if they could get top 20 quarterback play, don't you think they could play relevant football into December?
Yes. I do think that is a possibility, but that needs a lot of things to go well. I think if you're getting top 20 quarterback play, it would suggest to me that the other things are working well. For example, not necessarily defensively, but it would suggest to me that the running game is working in a way that it's allowing the quarterback to be more successful, allowing them to be more efficient. That part is that I do tie those things together. Now, having said that, the defense to me has a monster opportunity to be really, really good this year.
Right.
I am very curious to see what Jim Schwartz has to say about like how his feeling about this group. And I know he's going to be super reserved and go, well, you know, and sort of play it. The guy I want to hear from, because he proved to be really prescient last year, was Jacques Césaire. Of all the coaches, I'm curious to hear from him. And I guess to a certain extent, I'm curious to hear from Jason Tarver, because Jason Tarver might be the greatest position coach in the world in terms of being able to get guys to play well at linebacker. And now every time they've invested in it, he's gotten really good play out of them. So I'm curious. But Jacques Césaire, when Isaiah McGuire was projected to be the 5th end on the roster, he was the guy who first jumped out of Jacques Césaire's mouth last year in terms of, one, now it didn't happen, but he did say he has double-digit sack potential and was really impressed with where he was. And that proved to be super prescient, because obviously Isaiah McGuire ended up being they traded Zadarius Smith, and Alex Wright got hurt. But even if Alex Wright didn't get hurt, I think Isaiah McGuire was ultimately going to blow right by him. He is clearly the second best defensive end on this team and has a chance to be the best defensive end that Myles Garrett has played with in his career to this point. Olivier Vernon will be tough to beat, but nevertheless, Isaiah McGuire not only has the ability to have the staying power that they haven't had there, but if he takes another step forward, he could be very, very good. So I'm very curious to see what he has to say, because Jacques Césaire obviously may have the biggest job, most important job of anyone on this team this year. They have given him a ton of resources to work with, and they have high expectations for that group to perform.
I mean, I have high expectations for the defensive line and the linebacker room. I mean, the linebacker room, even without JOK, I mean, it's not deficient of talent. They have guys there that can play. They've got Baker. They've got Hicks. They brought in Schlesinger. They've got Diabate. I mean, they should be good enough, right? Like, especially with the group in front of them and with Tarver coaching him.
I'm very hopeful that Jordan Hicks can stay healthy, because Jordan Hicks is very, very good for what he does.
Right.
But yes, I mean, ultimately you want this to become Carson Schlesinger's defense. Him ultimately evolve into the mic and be able to make those calls and stuff. But because if those things work, then the upside is there. It should make the secondary significantly better, and could, 2023 is always going to be difficult to match. But I think in terms of how you feel about the defense, I think they have a chance. Obviously, a big question to answer at safety, with who's going to play opposite Grant Delpit and what does that look like. But they have, they have to get really good play out of those corners. And if the defensive line is as good as it should be great. That group allows them to do things. And if the Browns, whether it's Joe Flacco or anyone else at quarterback, and they don't feel like, listen, I'd be more than happy if they go out and put up 40. But if they just have to get 25, this thing becomes a whole lot more realistic. And the other thing, we don't talk about as much because nobody cares about special teams until we need them. One would hope that they're going to kick better than they did last year, which obviously put them in a ton of bad situations. But there are arguments I can make for this team being better. They've got to stay healthy. The Browns announced a whole bunch of hirings for their training staff and promotions and stuff. Now, I don't get into the promotions and stuff, nor am I going to evaluate the coaching, the training staff. But they did hire. They did hire, because this was one of the things that was on that report card. They did hire more training staff because the feeling was that they were deficient. They didn't have space for them. And now with the changes they're making, that they should have more space to accommodate them, which should hopefully help get a better result in terms of hopefully preventing injuries, but recovering from them or limiting the overall damage, that we're not in a situation where we're sitting there and it's week 3 and we're already going, oh my God, how are they going to get out of there on Sunday? But the last thing I'll say with Zach Jackson's point is the biggest thing, and obviously it will be different because the schedule is much more difficult. He's 100% right. If Deshaun Watson wasn't terrible outside of the Raiders game, which I won't put on him. There were multiple games the Browns should have won early in the season. It would change
He
the
still
complexion of the team.
should have gone down the field and won the game at the end. But
Yes. Nevertheless, but the problem is the Browns' schedule is going to be difficult from the get-go. I'm hoping that the attitude they're taking in terms of practice and who they want to be, and if this attitude continues throughout camp, that it's going to get them to be the team they need to be to succeed with the way they want to play. Those things are all good, but we got to see it because they won 3 games last year. So
yeah, and they won 11 the year before, and
Yep.
so, but that's kind of my point, right? So it's not that far off from the roster that won 11 games, and while there was some flukiness at the end of the year and the run they went on, that's the NFL. Like, so in the NFL, I'll say this, like, and while I understand that the Browns have a lot to prove this year and the schedule looks incredibly daunting, and they have the first thing they have to answer is who's going to, can they get quality quarterback play? And without it, they won't have much of a chance. But each year in the NFL is its own entity. So, like, you can go in and you can make all these predictions about all these teams and that the roster looks this hard, and it can turn and end up being ass backwards. And, some of these teams could have injuries. They may be playing their quarterback gets hurt, and suddenly a couple breaks go your way, and the season looks completely different. It happens all the time. It's why there's 4 new playoff teams every year in the NFL. It's why a team can go from 11 wins to 3 wins with the same roster, right? Like, it's kind of inherent in the NFL that it's its own entity every year, and the story or the journey that you're going to have to go through as a team from training camp and all the way through presents its own trials and tribulations every year. Sometimes you can overcome them, sometimes you can't, but it's like that for every team, and that's why it's such a league of parity at times.
The biggest thing I think, well, not the biggest, but one of the things that I think will be important is this year they have to be better coached. There are reasons to believe they will be with getting things cleaned up in terms of the offensive line coach, getting a guy like Bloomgren who fits in a lot of ways. If you feel good about Tommy Rees, that element should be better. And then getting Bill Musgrave more involved could prove beneficial. Those things have to be better. I want to come out of this season being reminded of how good Kevin Stefanski can be as a coach. Last year was brutal, not necessarily in management or execution in terms of like operating the game, but just they were so bad. And at some point, like they lost, not necessarily lost control, but it just got away from them, and it needs to be significantly better from that standpoint.
Sure. But that happens. That's kind of my point, is it does happen. Like, there are seasons like that. We've seen teams that have high expectations be shit before, right? Like, and we've seen vice versa. So I'm just saying that it's there. You don't know what's going to happen in any given football season. And while the expectations are not high.
Look, I'm inclined to believe the Browns are going to be a 3rd or 4th place team in the division. Nevertheless, the range of outcomes is wider than some people want to imagine. Albert Breer came out and said that the Browns have a chance to be competing for the playoffs at the end of the season. I don't disagree with that if they can stay healthy and if they get these things right.
Yeah. Yeah, surely. All right. I don't know if this is all right. Let me get up the second clip. This was in direct response to the PFF thing from Zach, and then we'll go to more on that from the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, which is kind of funny. Here we go.
Too far in attacking the Browns when PFF has them ranked 32nd in terms of their roster, when you still have Myles Garrett on that roster?
Yeah, I think that's way off base, but I think it's June, right? I got to do June and July content too. Like when minicamp ends next week, there's 6 weeks. And Anthony, really, it's a completely different reaction, but that is zero different than the last 2 years when people would get on and fight about the ranking list and say the Browns are better than 8th, the Browns are better than 11th. And what did that lead to? You know, so yeah, no sane person thinks the Browns have the 32nd most talented roster, and there's probably no sane person that thinks that they're a bottom 5 talent roster. They're closer to the bottom than the top, but that to me was absurd.
I think you can make a compelling argument they're in the bottom 5, and frankly, I listened to it. Check the mic, both had the Browns at the bottom 5. And here's the thing: even though they had them in the bottom 5, they both said, "I like what the Browns are doing in dealing with the sort of aftermath of Deshaun Watson, and they like the way they're going." Like both of them genuinely said they felt bad about putting them in the bottom 5. I don't have a problem with that because I agree with the overall point.
I don't see how you can put him in the bottom 5 though. I think it's based off the quarterback.
Yeah, they flat out will tell you that, but and I'll give you the context. Again, they said the Saints and the Titans are clearly below everybody else. And then they had the Giants and the Patriots in there. It's tough to come up with another team that's definitively worse than the Browns at that point. The Browns are, nobody in the NFC North, for example. You might try and make the argument Jacksonville does, but it's tough because they have whatever you think of Trevor Lawrence, he's certainly better than what the Browns have. So it's tough. The AFC West, Geno Smith does a lot for them in terms of making that team look more realistic. I think overall, if not for that, I think Geno Smith is worth enough wins that you can make up for that. Look, if I take quarterback out of the mix, the Cincinnati Bengals are near the bottom. Straight up, they are bad.
Yes,
in a lot of areas. But
are the Steelers really that much better of a roster than the Browns?
Better enough.
I would argue they're very close.
But I know at one point I saw Matt Miller say this is the least talented roster, the Mike Tomlin area. I disagree. I think 2021 was real bad. But no, I mean,
where are they strong at?
Defensive line. If you like what the Steelers, a lot depends on what you believe. If you believe in the Steelers, a lot of it's because they have a very young offensive line that you think is going to become better. That you have DK Metcalf. That you have.
But they say that every year.
But yeah, I don't think they're much better. I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to fix their problems. I love the idea of them just saying, screw it, we're going to go with Mason Rudolph.
I think the Colts are a good team, but do I think that they're top to a better roster than the Browns? I think they're pretty close.
Colts, I don't think you're wrong, although it's weird because the Colts have things that the Browns would really like their weapons. They would really like to have all their weapons. I mean, look, they have a running back that, one of the best in the league. They have tight ends. They have receivers. That other thing. But
I'm not concerned.
This is the thing.
All.
And again, I think the overall point remains the same. The difference between where the bottom, the 26th team versus the 18th team is minimal. One thing goes wrong and it can completely change. But I agree with you. I don't think the Colts are particularly good. I don't think their defense is all that impressive. So yeah, I think I'm willing to listen to the argument that the Browns are a bottom 5 roster, but so I'm not going to say somebody is insane for making that argument, but
I would.
Man, Myles Garrett's really good. I would just say that Myles Garrett does a whole lot. He's a franchise quarterback on defense, and that should get you a lot further than it does. Which again, check the mic. Those guys made that case too. So, I don't have a problem with it because I'm not worried about where they are now. I'm worried about where they will be, and I feel cautiously optimistic about the direction of this team. But I'm also sitting here going, man. In next year's draft, I already have 4 things I gotta get done.
Yeah, and I mean you're marking those first round picks before we even have a quarterback.
Correct.
Yeah,
they're done.
I mean,
offensive, quarterback and offensive tackle. Lock it up.
I mean, yeah, both of those may be needed to get that quarterback.
Unless they want to take another defensive tackle and get that kid from Clemson, we could do that.
MC, I'm not underestimating them. I think that their roster, if you take the quarterback out of the equation, I think their roster is there with the most of the NFL. Yes, they're deficient at wide receiver, but they're better other places than other teams are. So, I mean, it depends on what kind of quarterback play you get. Ultimately, is going to be the deciding factor. Like, I'm not worried about them at running back. Like, I'm really not. I think Judkins and Sampson and Ford will be a great combination, the three of them.
I want to see it. And it's not because I don't necessarily think the backs will be fine. When it comes to Judkins, he needs blocking. I love what he can do. Now, he is not Nick Chubb. He's never going to be Nick Chubb. But he needs blocking, and his strength is really – like, I completely understand why the Browns thought he was the guy to take. They need that type of back. The thing that jumps out with me with Judkins, I've never seen him, like, take a real hit. He always gets up and is like, fine, and ready to go. That stands out to me. We'll see. The NFL may change that, but, like, having said that, he needs blocking. Now, if they can get blocking, get him in the alley, be able to get him off tackle. He's nasty. I'm very curious to see what Dylan Sampson can do. And again, I've said this
out
all
of
along.
trouble so
I'm a Jerome
backfield.
Ford truther in terms of what happens if he gets consistent blocking. I still think occasionally he's going to do stuff that makes me want to pull my hair out. But, like, at the same time, like, he also has the capacity to just house it. So I'm hoping you can get a little more consistency with him. I'm hoping that a smaller workload and sort of, a more focused Jerome Ford will get you the more consistent, better results. I think that group can be really good. I just think all of them are predicated on blocking in a way that, like, which is, look, in many ways, that's the nature of the beast. Nick Chubb was that dude that could fix bad situations. He could make guys better. I don't see any of the backs they have that can do that. And few can. I mean, there's only a couple in the league that can really do that. Derrick Henry's one of them. Saquon Barkley isn't one of them. I mean, that Saquon Barkley couldn't be Saquon Barkley in the way that we really wanted him to be until he got to the Philadelphia Eagles. It's really tough. So, look, I'm very excited to see what Mike Bloomgren can do with his unit. I'm very excited what he can get out of DeJuan Jones. I want to see him get these younger guys going. I want to see if Tevin Jenkins can stay healthy.
Yeah. I mean, I just think they have a better group up front already, but just by who they added with Cornelius and
yes, undoubtedly they have 7 credible linemen to me.
Yeah.
And right off the rip. Now, the worry you have
better.
Yeah, the worry people have, and I don't think is unfounded, is the fact that, like, basically the entire group is on a 1-year deal.
Right. And I get that, but, like, I don't know. I've seen some of my favorite highlights from Sampson are him basically escaping somehow from the backfield, when he's got no place to go. Like, he's got some wiggle. I mean, he can make some things happen when there's nothing there.
With him, I'm hoping that, I've seen him do some of those things. I'm hoping that the Browns can manipulate space that allows him to be special in terms of, be able to spread teams out, being able to just overpower teams and get him in space. I think he and the Tennessee offense did more that looks projectable to the NFL than Jalen Wright did the year before, where it was literally just endless spread. Like, there were more condensed formations, there were more stacked boxes that Dylan Sampson had to figure out. Now, it's not many more, but it's certainly more than when they had Jalen Wright.
Yeah, I like both backs. I think it's an improvement off of what they had last year in the backfield.
Oh, undoubtedly. There's no question that, like, I'm good not seeing any more Pierre Strong. I don't need any more of those reps.
All right, then let's transition to of course, we always like to finish the show off on Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show's opinions on things. So here they are talking about this exact topic. And it's going to be, you're just going to love this, Pete. I always save the best for last for you, because I know you're going to love when they talk about this stuff. And our favorite guy is back.
On to our next topic, guys. We'll get back to a little more Guardians later in the show. But today's from aerospace to electric corners, easier finds the lane. I'll tell you what it is and where the Browns started. PFF ranked every roster in the NFL 1 to 32, taking in a variety of different factors. They said if there was a tie, they reverted back to their overall PFF grades for position by position to determine any ties. There was not a tie with the Browns, just so we're all clear, but that is how they did some of this determination. When Andrew Berry took over the Browns, and shout out to Ben Axelrod, former WKYC person, for pointing this out to me, but when Andrew Berry took over the Browns, the Browns were 11th in PFF's overall roster rankings heading into that season. They released their top 32
I'm familiar with
this
this
season,
tweet, and I thought it was
and I'll show you the
idiotic.
first 6 teams up on the list. In order, the Eagles, according to PFF, have the best roster in football, followed by the Ravens, the Lions, the Chiefs, the Bills, the Rams. No big issue. We could disagree on an order, whatnot, but pretty much those are 6 of the best teams in football. They have 6 of the best rosters. That's the top 6. Let's look at the bottom 6 now. 27, the Giants. 28,
Tennessee
the Jets.
Titans twice. They're so bad.
29, the Panthers.
How the Titans get 30 and
Because 30 is supposed to be the New Orleans Saints, and I copy and pasted.
Oh, okay.
31 is the Titans. And,
they suck so bad they're 30 and 31.
32 is the.
Okay, I think the Browns roster, excluding the quarterback, is better than every team on that list.
Carolina's pretty bad. I hadn't considered Carolina. They're pretty bad. The Jets, they have. They're not good either.
No, neither are the Giants.
No, but here's the thing. At least with the Jets and the Giants, they have things I want. They have players I would take on this football team. But overall, no, I don't think they're very good. I think the Jets have a number of holes. You know, everybody wants to say the Browns have the worst wide receiver group in the league. Look, it's Garrett Wilson and nobody in New York.
Sure, Serge. Include the quarterbacks then for all those teams. Yeah, their quarterbacks are so amazing. I mean, what are we talking about? Who are you? I mean, what? Fine, include the quarterbacks. It's still better than all of them. Giants don't have a quarterback.
Well, they're clearly making the argument that the combination of Russell Wilson and Jackson Dart is better than what the Browns have. And this is again where I think where Shedeur is drafted is hurting him in this ranking, fairly or not. But unquestionably, Russell Wilson is should be better than what the Browns have. You know, Joe Flacco's potentially good enough to make that interesting. Again, but the Giants are another team where, man, they have some really good defensive linemen. That group should be very good, but outside of that, it's another group where it's like, ugh. And the thing is, like, the team that's not on here that I think has a compelling argument to beat is the Miami Dolphins. They suck. They have nothing, and here's this is where I sort of contrast with the
Patriots.
Browns. Well, yeah, the New England Patriots are bad, but here's where I contrast sort of like the Miami Dolphins versus the Cleveland Browns. Outside of Chop Robinson and, you know, a couple other players, Jalen Waddle, that team is gone in like 2 or 3 years. There's no future there. So in some ways, look, and Tua is certainly better than what the Browns have, but it just to me feels like when you get into this type of ranking, I understand why you put the Browns so low, but like the Miami Dolphins to me are a castle built on sand. They are in danger of falling completely apart, and everybody could end up getting fired from that job. So yeah, I think I agree with you. The Browns are better than many of these teams. The Giants are at least interesting because there are players they have that are legitimately dudes I want. Obviously, Abdul Carter leads the list, but I mean, they have 3 edge rushers I would love to have. And their nose tackle is the best in football. And absolutely destroyed the Browns.
What if I threw the
their
Arizona
left tackle? I would
Cardinals?
take their left tackle in a heartbeat too.
What if I threw the Arizona Cardinals and the Seattle Seahawks in the mix?
Arizona has more than. I think Seattle's bad. To be clear, I think Seattle's very bad. Arizona has more than you think they do. They went and spent a lot of resources to improve what was a ghastly defensive line. Frankly, I don't even know, is Dennis the Barbarian Garchek still out there? Because I'd be interested in bringing him in. But they got Dalvin Tomlinson. They had the kid they drafted last year, missed a lot of time with injury. They've spent a lot of resources to improve that group. I think the Arizona Cardinals are going to be. I think they're going to be in the mix for the NFC West. I think they are. They have a puncher's chance. I still think they're going to fall short. I could see the Arizona Cardinals finishing higher than the San Francisco 49ers this year. So I do think they have enough there to be interesting. Now they need Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. to get on the same page, because that was not good in that last year and was frankly disappointing relative to what they needed that to be. That's got to take a huge step forward. But I think Arizona has more talent than they've certainly had in the past. I think they're okay.
What about the Dallas Cowboys?
Dallas Cowboys, Dak Prescott. Look, we bag on him. Or I should say we as a collective, people bag on him. He's a good quarterback. He may not be a great playoff quarterback, but he's a good quarterback. They have a good offensive line that needs a couple things to work out. CeeDee Lamb is great. They're taking a huge risk by bringing in, bringing in the dude from Pittsburgh. Defensively is a huge question mark. They have lost a lot of guys. Micah Parsons is phenomenal. Let's not throw out the idea that the Browns could use one of those first-round picks to trade for Micah Parsons. I'm just throwing that out there. But if they really don't want to get that contract done, but like after that, like they've got some okay defenders. I just think they've hemorrhaged a lot of talent from that group over the course of years. So I think that Dallas's offense is frightening enough. But if
it is.
If to play them, I think that'd be a compelling matchup.
Yeah, I feel like it's almost a little bit of a house of cards thing they got going on there. Like there's talent, there's flashy talent around the roster, but like as you dig deeper into that roster, a lot of that has fallen to the wayside. I don't know.
Yeah, well, but the thing that Dallas has going for them, and I suspect they got the benefit of the doubt on this to some extent. I don't know where they were actually ranked. Dallas drafts really well. They do everything else super poorly, from negotiating contracts to trades to free agents. They draft really, really well. Will Clay does a really good job with them. And that's ultimately going to change the complexion of this so much. If Andrew Berry did well, and there are reasons to believe he did, if Mike Hall can stay on the field, if Juwan Briggs is going to prove to be the guy I think he can be, where he becomes basically Shelby Harris, if you get those guys to play well, and then you also add in Mason Graham as a rookie, if you get Carson Schwechner to step on the field, if Quinshon Judkins can be a contributor, if you can get something out of Harold Fanden, I have a strong suspicion Harold Fanden's going to be pretty good right out the gate. He's just a pain in the ass to deal with from a coverage standpoint. In a world where David Njoku is healthy, if he can stay healthy, I think Harold Fanden becomes really problematic. They are counting on those guys to be able to do a lot of the work to lift this group. And I think there's reason to believe they can, but it's got to happen. And that's where, again, I will harp on this endlessly. And if I was up at OTAs, this would be, or I should say, if I was up at training camp or any of these practices, that would be the thing I would be looking at first and foremost, is just how these practices are running. Because I think that is going to be indicative of a positive change more than anything else the Browns are doing this year.
I agree. Serge is asking me where I would put them. Give him a number. All right. So including the quarterback, everything, I would put them just outside of 20, like 21. And that's including the quarterback. So if you get, to my point, if you get top 20 quarterback play, if you took the quarterback off the Browns roster, I would put them around right in the middle of the pack. If you just took rosters, take all the quarterbacks gone, put all the rosters up there, I would put them right around 15.
So the thing that's interesting is they referenced the tweet of comparing the Browns roster rankings relative to PFF from when Andrew Berry took the job to where they are now. Obviously, the Deshaun Watson trade has huge impact on that. But you go back and you look at what was actually said about the Browns roster. It touts Odell Beckham as being a great receiver. He tore his ACL week 2 and basically disappeared off the face of the earth outside of that run in the playoffs with the Rams. Jarvis Landry got outproduced and outplayed by Rashard Higgins that year. David Njoku's still here. And obviously Nick Chubb was doing a lot, and they had Baker Mayfield. Those things are all going to be those two elements, Baker Mayfield and Nick Chubb, were the difference for that team. They carried that thing that year. Baker Mayfield had the best season from an efficiency standpoint of his career, and Nick Chubb was great. The offensive line was great. Their receivers were awful. They got timely play out of guys like DPJ in his rookie year, catching like
Higgins was timely.
But Rashard Higgins had the best year of his career that year. Almost cracked 1,000 yards. But they were bad. Like, that group was terrible. Jarvis Landry just fell off the face of the earth after that. And, there's people revisiting his legacy. Like, he was some great player. He wasn't. And like, the second he left town, everybody forgot he existed other than G. Bush, who tried to sign him for the playoff run. They've immediately had better receivers since he's left. Jerry Jeudy is already better than Landry. Now, Landry's first year, he had 4 100-yard games, which was really good. He had four the other 3 years combined.
He was good for the first couple of years he was here. I mean, not great, but he was good.
2019, he was good. That was it. And they were terrible as a team, but that was his best year.
Yeah.
20 I think it's 2020 where he had not 2020, 2018, I think he had 976 yards on 157 targets, which is atrocious. The legacy that people still want to call him a cultural touchstone. Like, give me a break.
Aaron Pierce brings up the Raiders. I think the Raiders are going to be highly improved.
Well, Geno Smith just changes that dynamic. Geno Smith is a good quarterback, and he's going to have a better line in the Raiders than he's had for years in Seattle. It remains to be seen what Ashton Genty is going to be able to do right out the gate. But those two, look, I mentioned this before the draft. If you are just saying, I want the Browns to try to max their win total in 1 year, the move would have been draft Ashton Genty. Because that has the chance to sort of juice your win total immediately more than any other position. Deservedly. Jarvis Landry was not great. Jerry Jeudy, way better. Amari Cooper, light years better. But hey, he gave a speech on camera, so put him in the Hall of Fame. But yeah,
it's contagious, bro.
But yeah.
You're flustered just from me saying that. Contagious.
It's contagious. Yeah, just we people made so much out of so little with him. Look, I'll never forget his unforgettable performance against the Chiefs in the playoffs, where he hit 2 yards and a key drop.
They're still better than the Browns.
30 is the Saints. I apologize. That is me being in a rush this morning. So they started when Andrew Berry took over the team at number 11.
No.
In the most recent iteration, entering the 2025 season, they have fallen down to number 32. Do you guys have...
What he fails to mention is that in between then, they went all the way up to 1 or 2 1 year.
Any issue or any disagreement with PFF.
Before Watson turned into a vampire, they were like the first or second best roster at PFF going in.
Well, I mean, it was the
PFF,
reason they
that's
traded
over-
for Watson because the rest of the roster was so good.
Right.
Overall rosters, thinking the Browns are the worst of the worst this year.
Well, normally PFF's dead to me.
I'm with you. I think PFF is.
I think PFF is lost. I think they get some of the guys right, but then I look at some of the players' numbers, and I don't know what they're watching. And I know they've got former players and scouts and coaching and all that, whatever their complicated formula is. But in this particular thing, when I got this last night and I started thinking about this topic, the first thing I said was, okay, let's start a quarterback, because that's the most important position in the sport. They've got 4, and we don't know much about any of them except for Joe Flacco was good once and is old now. So I'm not giving him any points at quarterback. Who's our best running back? I don't know. Who's our best wide receiver? It's probably Judy, but is he really a wide receiver 1?
I did this with Tybus. We was on the barbershop, and we did a blind test. I took the list of the top 32. PFF had their rankings out, and I put Jerry Judy in the mix.
Yeah.
Tybus had him as a tier 2.
Who do they have offensively that's a top 5 player at their position? Top 10 player?
Jerry Judy's not.
Maybe Njoku?
Jerry Judy's not even top 32. They don't have him listed.
That's why I
top
said
32
maybe
receivers.
he's a wide receiver 1. Maybe. Yeah. I don't think he is,
Better
but
than
I mean,
that,
he's
though.
our wide receiver 1, so I guess he has to be. But when you start looking at it that way, I'm fine with them being 32. The other thing to me is, and this is a point that we weren't really going to discuss, but when you mentioned that Andrew Berry was number 11 when he got here and we're 32 now, this is why I continually scratch my head and shake it and say, wait a minute, how is this guy safe? How, in what universe is this job performance acceptable?
Yeah,
and that's why I will continue to say that, because he has the wheel in his hands. And if we were a bus, we're not driving to the Super Bowl, we've gone over the cliff. And so I don't understand in what universe anybody can look at that and say, he's good. Yeah, he's good. He's not in any jeopardy whatsoever. Okay, then you accept not mediocrity, and you accept and reward and continue to employ clearly a below average effort.
This is why people, they say, G. Bush, what are you talking about? This is why I say, if you're going to be 32 in talent, I need to see all rookies playing. This Mason Graham, I'm telling you again, Jim Schwartz, this should be a directive from the ownership. There's no way he's rotating. If you got Mike Hall and Mason Graham, they better be your starting defensive tackles day one. Not debatable.
You're a defensive lineman.
I think that's going to be the case.
Schlesinger, the
linebacker,
starter.
Yeah.
Harold Fanning Jr.
They're gonna play significant. What is he taught?
Unless starter means a entrenched role, which I'm confident Mason Graham will have. I don't worry about this, but like Jay Crawford saying, "Who's the best running back?" Okay, I'm gonna say the Raiders don't know who their best running back is either. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
like
just because you haven't seen it play it down yet,
welcome
pick
to what
one.
happens when you draft a running back and you expect them to start. They drafted 2 rookies. Like
seriously,
that's a meaningless point. But in terms of like Mason Graham, they have, and I know he doesn't know. As we established last week, they don't know who Javon Briggs is. You have Malik Collins, who's really good, and I know they claimed that he's like a player that other teams gave up on. He's a good player. He had 45 pressures that have been second on the Browns last year. Hopefully they're going to get that again. Yes, Mike Hall is going to play, but like this idea, he's not rotating. What the hell does that mean? It's the NFL. That's all anyone does. Like, what are you going to do? Put him out there 80% of the snaps? It just makes no sense. If it's 3rd and 10. Look, if Mason Graham is so good that you are forced to put him on the field, he demands to be on the field because he's so dominant, great. But if like Jeffrey Simmons isn't like the dude you want on the field in 3rd and 10, he's one of the best, one of the best true noses in the league. And obviously they have that combination of him and Devondre Sweat. Like, I want Malik Collins and Mike Hall on the field, straight up. The design of the defense is going to have those guys on the field in a pass rush situation. If the defense is working, that's how it's going to look. Carson Schwarzenegger, I'm pretty confident is going to be starting. It's just a question of where. Is he going to be the Mike? Is he going to be the Will? Is it going to be situational? I suspect it will be situationally. Quinshon Judkins and Dylan Sampson are going to play. Running back's another one where starter, I guess Quinshon Judkins is probably going to end up being the starter, but like ultimately it's going to be who's able to contribute. Harold Fannon's going to play. But like this idea, one, you want the owner to tell the team that they have to play all the rookies.
That's what I was going to say. Wait,
like what are we
don't
talking
you complain
about
all
here?
the time about him meddling, and then now we're asking him to bring down some sort of a mandate? I mean, pick one.
So if Jay Crawford's ultimate point, which is like that Andrew Berry's on the hot seat, if they stick this year, he's not going to be here next year. Kevin Stefanski's not going to be here if they can't improve and show life that this thing's working. If we have the same ending to this year as we did last year, where we're playing meaningless football, we're playing out the string, and this because of one, I think you're going to lose the locker room at that point. But then you're going to have to make a change. Welcome to it. Like, okay, cool. But ultimately, I think they are going to be better than that. But if you want to fire them, you should still at least him go down however he's going to do it. If you are now dictating that he has to do these things and you are saying you're not firing him because I made you do stupid things. And at that point, G. Bush has made the Cleveland Browns into the New York Jets, and they're run by a 13-year-old named Brick, which is the dumbest franchise in sports, where you sit here and you go, we're just going to do random crap because at the owner's whim. Like, this is not how you run a football team, and he should know better, which is why I don't know why he does this, where he just says shit, because that's exactly what this is. He just says shit. It means nothing. Let the coaching staff, let this team do it how it does. And if they're awful, fire them. But here's the problem: for the most part, save that. Obviously, you at least have a bone to pick for them passing over Travis Hunter. You can at least make that argument because that's a difference of opinion. But for the most part, the Browns have done everything you specifically asked them to do, and you're mad at them for it.
Yeah. Pat Shea, we're going to surprise a lot of people, including ourselves. I hope so. I think you're right. I agree with you. But this is madness, though. Like, it's like the point of him, when you talk about Andrew Berry, and I understand not everybody likes Andrew Berry, right? But like it's like looking at the situation with complete blinders on, like, it's obviously a below average effort. Yes, they were 3-14 last year. We so quickly forget that they won 11 games and went to the playoffs the year before that. Like, how quickly this turns around. And that was in the middle of the Watson screw up. They still were able to accomplish that. I mean, come on. It's just
right.
so frustrating.
Look, as I've said all along, if you want to fire them for the Deshaun Watson decision, you're completely valid. What I would push back on is to say that they didn't. And the other thing is you weren't going to fire them this past year because you're still in a nightmare situation in terms of cap and resources. If the Browns stink to a point where they have to make a change, at least you are now hiring somebody who can come in and go, I've got 2 first-round picks. I've got all this stuff to work with. We're about done with the Deshaun Watson debacle, and I can move on at that point. And at least you're going to have potentially an attractive job to give to somebody. But ultimately, I still don't think it's going to come to that. I think they're going to, earn themselves that extra year and then be able to pick the quarterback they want and whatever else. Now, at that point, I can't help them. It's either going to work or they're going to be done.
Yeah. But he's been patient to this point. He's not going to bail on it before he sees if they can dig out, right? Now that they have the assets. At least that's how I feel.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is what happens when you do make the move you make with Deshaun Watson. I think Andrew Berry has done a really good job in terms of restoring the chest of assets. Now, listen, my dream scenario is that the Jaguars are god awful, and that the Browns can use one of those picks to trade down later in the first round, get more assets, and keep the train rolling, and then pick an offensive tackle. But we'll see where that shakes out. Either way, they're still in a really good position to sort of build this thing. If they can do the things we're talking about, if the young players they've assembled over the last couple of years can start to sort of become this team, can take over what this team's going to be, if they can improve and show that this thing is working, that the face of where this team is going is all, the identity of this team is going to shine through. They're going to be a tough, hard-nosed team that plays great defense, can run the ball, avoid turnovers, and do those smart things and win games doing that. If they can do all those things, and this plan works, and they're really well set up for the future, and they can be right back in the mix in a year. But they've got to prove that, and until that, like I can't argue with Jay Crawford's obviously doing this forever, and if he could, he'd rehire John Dorsey's dumbass to come and run this team again. But I can't argue with him for saying that they should be on the hot seat. There's no compelling argument against it. They've got to take themselves out of that conversation and prove people wrong.
Garage Beers is up next. Make sure you hang around, hang out with Mike and the boys. I think they have an abbreviated show tonight, but they will be on here in a minute. So stick around at the OBR streaming network and make sure you hang out with them. Keep it locked over at the OBR. Pete putting out fantastic articles every day. Read all of that as we can look for tomorrow to be a crazy day around the Browns, as the media will once again be let loose on Berea, and we will get a glimpse of practice again, and what wild speculations and nonsense will be taken away will surely be entertaining. So keep it locked as we cover all of it from the beginning to the end. Thank you guys for the compliments. Thanks for watching. Make sure you guys hit like and subscribe on your way out if you haven't already. It only takes a second. It's free and it helps us out a ton. Any parting words, Pete?
Subscribe to the OBR if you can. Obviously, support us as much as possible. But yeah, we'll see how camp rolls out, and we'll see what it looks like, and hopefully be able to provide some level-headed analysis of what we're getting, because seemingly we need as much of it as we can get.
Well said. For Pete Smith, my name is Brad Ward. Keep it locked at the OBR. Keep it locked for Garage Beers. Next, we are out. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.